You see, the RSS is totally against, I mean, not against Gandhi, they actually killed him. So, because of his political and social philosophy, which was a human philosophy. And I think a lot of that we have lost.
Hi, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Happy Republic
Happy
Day.
Republic Day to all. Sir, we'll get started with your journey. You can tell us about your childhood and some of the memories that you recollect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as I said in the lecture the other day at your university, um, my parents came from mixed religious background. My father came from a Muslim family origin in Calcutta. My mother was half American, and her father was a high caste Brahmin, Indian, who had escaped during the freedom struggle to the US. The British, he had been a militant revolutionary against the British in Nagpur, and he had to leave British India. He couldn't come back till after independence, by which time he was a very old man. So my parents got married, unusual. My father was 30 years old. He had studied architecture in MIT in the US in the mid 40s, which was quite rare because very few Indians studied architecture in the US. In fact, he was the first. And MIT just did an exhibition of the first Asians from their various departments. So they had a big display on my father, which I saw last year. And my grandmother, my mother's mother was American, but she became a well-known classical dancer in India in the 1930s. Studied Kathakali and Bharatanatyam. So I grew up in this, my father was 30 when he married my mother, who was 15. So the family actually had a very unusual background. It's not a traditional, conventional background. Both of them were in the arts, father an architect, mother a dancer. Both ended up becoming quite famous. And my father worked his whole life for the government. In the beginning for West Bengal government, and then later on Nehru brought him to Delhi 1953 to be in the Central Public Works Department. And my father believed that working with the government and in public sector was the best chance for him to make a big contribution to India instead of working in the private sector. Because at that time, the government was the biggest builder. And this is in the 1950s. And coming to Delhi, when Delhi became the capital, a lot of new building had to be built for the institutions, the tax offices, the University Grants Commission, various office buildings, even for the police, the General Post Office headquarters. All of these were designed by my father. So this was the time of the new nation building after independence. My mother was a classical dancer. And, at that time, these forms like Bharatanatyam, Kathakali, etc. had not been seen. They were still quite local, either in Kerala or in Tamil Nadu or Madras. Even coming to the city of Madras, it was a first for the general public to see these forms. So someone like her brought these forms to North India and the rest of India, and in fact also around the world at that time. So both of them were involved in the arts, in the creation of, I would say, modern India after independence. When, you're looking at your own heritage, revival of classical dance and music, which was actually part of our modernism. Because the British had suppressed all of that, for 2 centuries. And so it was like a discovery that, my God, we have these amazing traditions. So that's the atmosphere I grew up in Delhi, which was a small city at that time. I was born in 1955. So I grew up, I met Nehru. So I'm, one of the people who remember Nehru quite well. I think I was 9 years old when he died. And I remember his funeral, and I have wonderful photographs my father took. Because, for the generation of my mother and father, Nehru was almost like a god. He was highly respected, highly regarded by them. And he was very important in their own lives because, the kind of work they were doing. He was hugely supportive and encouraging on a very personal level also. But he was also somebody who was very critical. So one famous building my father did, Rabindra Bhavan, which was the art center done on the centenary of Rabindranath Tagore's birth in Delhi. The first building my father designed looked like an office building. It looked a little bit like the building we were looking at here. And Nehru said, he looked at it, got very angry. He said, "What is this? This has nothing to do with Tagore." So, and my father got very agitated. He said, "Oh my God, I'm going to lose my job." So Nehru had a temper like that, and he wouldn't hold back. He would, he would deal with you like an ordinary person. And he told my father that you've done this memorial to Gandhi in Calcutta, which is why he brought him to Delhi, which is so beautiful. It's looking at our traditions, but done in a modern way. And then he had also done this tomb of Maulana Azad in Delhi, in front of the Jama Masjid, which also derived from the Mughal arch, but was a completely simple modern structure. So he said, "You've done those." My father said, "But those are memorials. They're not buildings, So he pushed my father into developing a vocabulary of architecture, which was like his memorials, but, related more to our tradition using jali, stone, and also abstracted elements from ancient architecture, but not in a direct way. And that building became famous. So Nehru actually had a hand in co-designing the building with my father. So that, that was the atmosphere I grew up in. So we had artists in the house, we had architects, we had musicians, dancers, all of whom are very big names, like Ravi Shankar and some filmmakers, who were doing the serious cinema, like Satyajit Ray, etc. So basically, that's I really came out of that Nehruvian India. And then I went to study physics. And I actually also learned Bharatanatyam, and I also performed as a young teenager, 11, 12-year-old. And but I realized I wouldn't be a dancer. Also, I started wearing glasses, and so it was difficult. But I became very interested in science, and I got admission to MIT to do physics in the physics department. And I got a full scholarship to go there, which is how I could go. This was in 1974, 73, 74. But in MIT, it was an institution which was very open in its educational vision. So it allowed you to do, I was doing all my science courses, maths, physics, quantum mechanics, etc. But you were allowed to take extra courses. And you were also required to do some creative or humanities courses. And they had an excellent photography department. So I started doing photography. And the professors were so fantastic and so interesting that I got seduced by the profession. And I also realized I wasn't good enough to be a serious scientist. Luckily, that was...
As we are on chessboard, I want not too political question, but I want to ask you, what is the Gandhian ideology you see?
Well, Gandhi, is a very complicated person as a philosopher. And the interesting thing with Gandhi, I'm not a super expert on Gandhian philosophy, but I have interacted with many historians, with many philosophers who have done serious work on Gandhi. The thing with Gandhi is, if you look at his history from when he was a barrister studying in England, then he goes to South Africa, what he sees in South Africa with the racism really forms his, his ideas of society and social justice. There, it was a question of, the blacks and the whites, but also the Asians, the Indians, because there was an Indian community there. So that even Gandhi's whole only history in South Africa is very rich
Yes.
and interesting in how he deals with that. But then when he comes here and he, understands the caste issues, he has a complicated reaction, because in one way now you look at it that, he believes that within the structure of Hinduism as it was structured with the castes, that you could still leave that structure intact,
Yeah.
but give rise to rights of the oppressed castes. That was the big battle he had with Ambedkar. Because Ambedkar, coming from low caste, highly educated, highly brilliant man, and it was Ambedkar's brilliance which made him the chief resistor against the caste system. Ambedkar's whole idea was that it has to be completely smashed,
Yes.
that the whole structure has to be demolished. So this debate went on, but Gandhi's ideas also changed over time, and that was the greatness with Gandhi. He would not, stick if he began to realize that there was some aspect of his belief which was not correct, he would change with time, and he was honest and open to that change. And I think the thing with Gandhi, he comes dressed in Western clothes, in the legal robes of England. But then his understanding of coming here and the reason of khadi, etc., was to connect with the ordinary peasant, the poorest of the poor, the working, literally the working class. And he became a labor leader in Ahmedabad, etc. So, here he was a totally modern man, but he learned about our society through traveling over India, and he developed this whole philosophy, which became, in a sense, it was adopted by the Congress, and it led to this mass movement against the British. And it was a people's movement. And that whole use of khadi, etc., I mean, even now wearing handloom, was something amazing that Gandhi developed and understood. Now, that whole history, there's also this complicated thing, was Gandhi anti-industrial, etc., which he really wasn't. They call him a Luddite, that he's against development. But, now when you're looking at the climate crisis and ecological crisis, Gandhi's whole idea was, how do you live with nature without being destructive? And now we're seeing that.
Yes.
So that whole idea of Gandhi is actually now become so relevant.
Yes.
With this overuse of plastics, how we are poisoning our environment. So his idea of the village, develop the village economy. It was a thing of scale.
Yes.
That you give people in their own environment, you give them a decent way of living to make a good life, and also education. He was very, very fixated on the idea of good education and for women's rights.
Yes.
All of these were looking at Indian society, and he felt that without education, you were not going to change society. And
Not
also,
at all.
education helped you get equal rights,
Yes.
because everyone would be then educated on an equal level.
Yes.
So those ideas, I think, if anyone follows them, that would be great. But I think you see, the RSS is totally against. I mean, not against Gandhi; they actually killed him.
Oh, yes.
So it's a complicated thing, and you see, Gandhi was somebody who was regarded over the whole world. I mean, he was a figure who was a remarkable figure internationally, because of his political and social philosophy, which was a human philosophy. And I think a lot of that we have lost.
Yes. as we come to the end, I want to ask you how you want the future generation to interpret your work.
Oh, that you can't, you can't direct. You see, when you make work or whatever you leave, whether it's my photography or the graphic design that I've done, the graphics, I've done hundreds and hundreds of book covers.
Yes.
Now, for me, that's very important because, the book is something that lasts
Yes.
and it goes to places that you would never expect.
Yeah.
Somebody will buy a book, and all of the books that I've designed are by historians or social scientists, and some of the biggest in India, the Professor Irfan Habib, uh, some of the foreign philosophers or social scientists or economists,
Yes.
Prabhat Patnaik, Romila Thapar,
Yeah.
these are all people I'm very close to actually.
Oh.
So, in my way of interacting with them has been to help make their books.
Yeah.
So that's something I know will last.
Yes.
And the photography, you can't say, how people will look at it, how it will end up also with. I have all my negatives in Delhi. They're not in any public place, and many of them have not even been printed.
Oh.
Even now, I'm trying to bring Sunil Jana's archive back to India.
I see.
It's in the US.
Yeah.
And I've been working on that for 30 years.
Oh, great.
Because that's an amazing piece of history and an amazing document. I just showed you a small fragment. It's a massive body of work.
Yeah.
And so one doesn't have an ambition, The thing is, you live the life as best you can without causing harm to anybody. And hopefully, bring something positive to society as you're living.
Yes. As you said, you are coming with the American project in India. What are your upcoming projects and exhibition do you want?
Well, one is I'm trying to bring that Jana archive back to India and make it public because a lot of it has not seen. The pictures you saw are very rare to see. But I'm also going through my own archive, and I also have archives of my father and my mother.
Yes.
So there's a huge architecture archive, there's a huge dance archive.
Great.
So I'm now I'm thinking of, where to place them in a publicly accessible manner. Because we don't have a tradition really of keeping archives very well in India. And also like the Nehru Memorial or the National Archives, you see now when the kind of politics change that we've had, that has also become a very dicey issue.
Yes,
because, with their ideas of changing history, etc., you don't know what's happening to the archives in those institutions, which are national institutions.
Yes.
So, we're in a strange situation. So I'm at this point really looking back at my own work because I don't know how much longer I have. I'm almost 70 years old, so I don't have a long time to put it together in some way that it can be out there for anyone who, it makes a difference to.
Okay.
Or who might find something interesting in it.
Yes. So the very last question, how you want people to remember you?
Oh, that's what I'm saying. You can't decide that. That what society thinks of, future generations think of you. Like my parents now both admired because of the work that they did.
Yeah.
So I think if your work is of the best quality and done with the sincerity and a conviction in your own field,
Yes.
whatever it may be, it could be engineering, it could be science,
Yeah.
it could be dance, it could be music. If you have done something which touches people and makes a difference in their life somehow, then you are remembered.
Yes. So this was Rahman sir. Thank you, sir, for your time.
Oh, you're
and
welcome.
we will end this here.